Today, the focus is really on giving you the tools to be able to ask the right questions and think critically about using e-learning. It's not as simple as just going off to a service provider and saying we'd like e-learning, please help us out. There are definitely some things to consider around process, around the way it's designed, around how you communicate it, deploy it, and if you're set up to actually use it technically within your business. So I'll be going through a lot of that today. So just a little bit before we start about Pure Learning. We are a specialist e-learning design and development company. Our focus is on creating effective e-learning. So we're very, very focused on improving performance, changing behavior. It's not about publishing out content, it's very much about the end outcome. So what is the desired performance that you want to improve? So we're talking about a little bit of that throughout as well. And just a little bit about myself and Raf as well. So as I mentioned, I'm the CEO of Pure Learning, and Raf, who'll be taking over in a second, is our Head of Client Solutions. So his role is really a customer advocate role. So he is going out there and talking with a lot of customers and getting a lot of these questions. And his role is really about identifying the needs and the best solutions for our customers. And also throughout the development process, being a real advocate for the customer and their outcome as well, and really making sure we're developing the most effective solution possible. So I'll hand over to Raf now, and he can briefly introduce himself as well and take you through the webinar.
Thank you very much for that, Matt. Hi, I'm Raf. I've been in the e-learning space for almost 8 years now, and it's a space that I'm very passionate about. This webinar, really for us, we put it together based on, I guess, reoccurring questions that we hear, and also, I guess, to break down some of the assumptions around how to approach e-learning within a business. As you know, depending which organisation you speak to, the understanding of what e-learning is, what it can achieve, is quite different. For the purposes of any questions, throughout the presentation, please feel free to type in any questions. Both Matt and myself can see the questions and we'll answer them as we go. And then at the end of the session, we also have potentially half an hour or so for those who are interested to answer any more specific questions you have, and also if those questions get really business specific, we can take those offline and speak directly with whoever needs to have a chat with us. So without further ado, let's get into it. So obviously the topic of this webinar is you want to use e-learning in your business for whatever reason, but you don't know where to start. First, I guess this is the disclaimer, just quickly talking through what is e-learning, and given that's quite a broad topic, it might be a better case to just quickly discuss what it isn't. So e-learning is training, it's not content. I think this is probably a pivotal statement for most organisations when they're thinking about it, very much depending who organisations have been exposed to and what they've seen. There is a bit of an understanding that, e-learning is you take a PowerPoint, you work it through a different program, you jazz it up, seems to be a common thing to be asked, and you put it online and you've got e-learning. Now, that's the same as saying that you're going to take a manual for an iPhone or something, make it digital, put it online and say that that's learning. That's obviously not the case. The learning is obviously what you do with the content and how you make it understandable and palatable for the learner. The other common assumption out there is that there's a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach to e-learning. So a lot of organisations really go, okay, what did you do for organisation X? Please do that for us. The challenge there being is, although organisations may from the outside look quite similar, they all have their own internal processes, their personnel are going to be unique to them. So it's very much a case of understanding a unique needs of a particular organisation and trying to address those, rather than trying to look at something that's worked for a different organisation and trying to wedge that into a new organisation. Usually that doesn't work. The only asterisk to that statement is probably when you're talking about compliance type training, where all organisations in Australia have the same requirements in terms of what they need to roll out to their learners. So that's where I guess you have a bit of a one size fits all, but even then, how that training's rolled out, how it's supported, what the follow-up looks like, and how it fits into the wider strategy, it's all going to be unique to the particular organisation. So now that that's out of the way, that was, I guess, the formalities of to cover off the context of this presentation. Our big focus for this presentation is all about giving you guys the questions you need to ask yourself and your organisation to get a sense of if you're ready for e-learning, if you've considered how it's going to fit in, and ensure that you're able to walk away from this presentation, go through these questions and critically think about how would e-learning be both adopted in your organisation, but how your organisation would then adapt to e-learning, making up part of the strategy. So the first question, probably the most important, is what are you trying to achieve with bringing e-learning into your organisation? A common response, I guess, is, oh, we just need this content online. That's not really a goal for e-learning. You need to go beyond that and ask some questions around what is motivating you to bring on e-learning in your organisation. And this question is going to be quite different for most organisations. If you're growing rapidly, it's probably going to be a case of it's no longer feasible to deliver training or inductions or whatever it is to a staff force that is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If there is knowledge gaps you've identified, is that what you're trying to address? Are you trying to take your organisation to the next level in terms of its performance? Understanding what it is that you're actually trying to achieve with a piece of learning is really important, because that will actually guide how you approach it, how you think about it, and also it'll guide the conversations you have with a provider around what you actually want a particular piece of e-learning to do for you. You need to understand what the state of things are at your business today. And this is obviously something that internally as a business you can do, but it does sometimes help to have someone external provide a bit of an outsider's view of what's going on and what's not going on. The reason you want to understand what is the state of things today, and that's the positives, the negatives, what is working very well, what you'd like to change, what has to change, and obviously looking at staff. That's all important, because you need to be able to see where you are today to work out where you want to be tomorrow. With that, you have to work out what your desired state is. Now, again, this doesn't have to strictly be thinking, okay, our desired state is to bring on e-learning. It's going back to, why do we want to bring on e-learning? So if you're a sales organisation, today's state is you get X amount of sales, or you get X amount of customer retention, or whatever it looks like. Tomorrow you want to improve that performance, and identifying what that improvement looks like and setting yourself goals, just the same you do from an operational perspective and from a staffing side of things. You need to identify that at a high level to work out where e-learning will be able to help that, but also it's important to do that to work out where your L&D strategy, broadly speaking, will fit in, and how to support your goals and what you want to be doing tomorrow. One thing I recently learned is at a conference was a lot of organisations have a approach of thinking about this, of that organisation over there looks like what we want to be. So you often say, oh, we want to be Google. It is one that was an example discussed at a conference recently, and it's a false way of trying to set goals, because ultimately the outward face of Google is very different to inside of Google, and their journey and how they're set up and how they adapt is going to be very different to your organisation's needs. So it can't be we want to be doing what that organisation is doing. It's looking at what do we want to be doing and achieving as an organisation, and then working from that point backwards towards where does e-learning fit in, where does the rest of the L&D strategy fit in. Question that kind of circles around all those points is, what problem are we trying to fix? Very often this is a motivation at organisations to bring on e-learning. So this is an important question, but it's also a tricky one, because depending on how you look at a problem, you may identify that you're trying to solve something that maybe isn't quite there. For example, if you're an organisation that has a system and your staff aren't using that system very well, and it's a data system, and you're finding that the data isn't very good, you could definitely go, okay, great, we need some e-learning about how to use this system. We need our staff to know the processes, how to type in data, and there can be learning checks, and they can get really involved around here's how you use the system. But when you start to scratch below the surface, you may uncover that people actually know how to use the system. They understand, but they don't understand why they have to use a system. And that's where you can find a situation where if you haven't done a good analysis of your business or haven't had someone help you do a good analysis, you could end up producing e-learning that doesn't actually address the problem you're trying to solve. You'll produce e-learning that's, okay, great, this is how you use the system, staff will complete it, but ultimately they still won't understand why they're using the system, what the benefit is for their organisation, what the benefit is for them, and what the benefit is for their clients. That's what's going to motivate them to use it correctly. And I think that's a really important differentiation to make, and really critically think about what is the problem that we're actually trying to solve. The result of it may be a system or a process or sales not going well, but what is the actual cause of that symptom, rather than trying to, I guess, address the symptom itself. Okay, so technology, I think for a lot of organisations looking at this, and it's kind of a case of, yeah, we've got computers, and that's sort of the extent of it. It does go a little bit deeper in terms of understanding, do you have technology that once you roll out this e-learning, it's not going to cause issues in terms of learners being able to access it, and it's not going to cause your organisation issues in terms of being able to see who's consuming that training, how it's being consumed, and all that sort of thing. So first off, question to ask, do we have an LMS? Now, depending who you're speaking with at an organisation, you may want to also ask the question, what is an LMS? I've spoken to a few organisations now that they are at that point, they're very early stage, and it really is a case of, when I say LMS, slightly blank look. So for the benefit of this presentation, I thought I'd just quickly touch on what an LMS is. So obviously an LMS is a system that you then take your e-learning solutions and you put into this system, and then you're able to distribute it to your learners. Obviously the powers of the LMS is one, distribution. You're also able to record who's completed the training, who's performed how in that training. So it gives you a really good picture of which learners have been able to successfully complete the training, which learners perhaps are not, and at that point it gives you a catalyst to act on that. The LMS power is that it shows you who is struggling potentially, who isn't, and the power in that information is what you do with it, rather than just knowing. So if someone is struggling with a particular topic, you're able to identify that and then either follow up with performance training or additional e-learning or informal sort of social learning solutions. So that's quite an important question. Big question to ask is, how will staff access the e-learning? So This is an interesting one, depending which organisation you speak with. A lot of them want, for example, their e-learning to be compatible with tablets and mobile and all that sort of thing. And that usually comes from those organisations Googling what the latest trends are in e-learning, for example, and seeing that mobile learning is a trend and saying, great, that's what we're going to be doing at our organisation. You need to actually ask the question within the organisation and see how people work in your organisation. Are you going to be distributing the learning so people complete it in their work time? Is this something that they're going to complete after hours? Or is this something that they're going to complete, in the case on pre-onboarding type inductions, before they start on day one? And the reason this is important is if, for example, you do want to have the learning rolled out targeting iPad devices, the design of that learning is going to be quite different to if it was for desktop and if it was, for example, for mobile phones. Very often what you find is there's a temptation to assume that you design one piece of learning and learners will be able to consume that and really get the benefits of it, viewing that on desktop or iPad or mobile. The reality of it is the approaches are quite different, and actually tablets and desktop are probably more closely related to each other than tablets and mobile phones. But that's a whole other exciting topic that we'll touch on in potentially another webinar or a blog. So this is a kind of sounding a similar question, but this is understanding how will e-learning be used in your organisation. So again, one of the big, I guess, traps of e-learning is thinking that we've got a problem, we'll go out to a provider, they'll design a solution for us, we'll roll that out, and at that point that problem will be solved just because people get an email in their inbox saying, hey, you now have to complete training on compliance or privacy. The reality of it is that's not going to yield the full effect of the e-learning. So what you need to, I guess, understand is what is that piece of training going to look like in terms of, one, how often is it completed? Obviously, if you have a piece of training that for whatever reason learners need to complete every quarter or every 6 months, it's going to be different to a piece of training you expect people to complete yearly, and it's also going to be different to a piece of training that you expect learners to complete on demand. So that's a really important question, and usually the topics or the problem you're trying to address will drive these, but again, depending on organisational culture, what your goals are and all that, there will be slight differences from organisation to organisation, and that even goes as far as compliance training. Many organisations just have an annual cycle for their compliance training. Some organisations choose to have it every 6 months, just so that message stays out there and I guess is more relatable and relevant. The other important bit is, will the e-learning be part of a blended solution? Obviously, most rollouts should be part of a blended solution, and that doesn't have to be a blended solution that is formal face-to-face training and formal e-learning. It can be a blended solution that understands that, okay, a piece of learning is going to be rolled out. The managers or the team leaders will have instruction to then follow up with their teams and have a conversation around that topic, or there'll be forums for staff to discuss that topic together, or there will be formal training. It's one of those things where very often the blended question comes up, and it's a very face-to-face facilitated session and e-learning. Blended can be made up of informal training. It can be made up of one-on-ones covering this sort of material and complementing the learning. The other important thing there being is the e-learning designed to complement your face-to-face and social learning, or is the face-to-face and social designed to complement the e-learning itself? And obviously that'll drive your strategy around what the material is within the e-learning and also how often rolls out and what the structure looks like and if it's on demand. Another piece, and this is semi-motivational for, I guess, staff, but is the training going to directly relate to KPIs that the learner has? Now, this can either be performance-based KPIs, so there's an expectation of increased performance, and as part of that, the learners are provided e-learning resources that they can access, complete, and improve their performance and demonstrate that they've been bettering themselves. Or it can be on the flip side of it, if someone is underperforming, it's a requirement for them to complete certain bits of training to ensure that their performance meets the level that it needs to be. With all of these, obviously being clear around what the point of learning is and how often it is to your learners is another important piece, but I'll touch on that in a moment. So this is us sitting down and working out, what sort of questions are the fundamental questions you want to ask providers. And this is particularly handy for organisations which, one, obviously haven't done e-learning previously, so here's, I guess, a cheat sheet of a few questions. But also it's handy for organisations that have perhaps engaged with providers previously and are finding that they're not getting the result they want from those providers, which is another common conversation I'm having, where at the start of a project, a very rosy picture is painted about how amazing a solution is going to be. And at the conclusion of that project, there's some fairly evident differences of opinion identified. And obviously that leads to a negative experience for the organisation who is taking on board e-learning, because they would have pushed themselves to go there and take on this new technology and they thought they had a great plan, and then it falls over at the last hurdle. So here's a few questions that are important to ask. Just before we get into that, one of the biggest things when you're going out to providers is don't try to self-diagnose too much in terms of what your solution will look like and what the problem is. You want the provider to help you a little bit with that. I think that the worst thing that can happen is if you go to a provider and you already have within your organizations gone to all the effort around saying, hey, here's the problem and we need some e-learning on this topic, and getting it through all the management team and sign off and all that sort of thing, and then getting to a provider who at that point discovers that one, the training that you felt was going to address your issue isn't, or even worse, that provider just goes, yeah, absolutely, we'll do that for you, knowing that the solution you're after isn't going to achieve your goals. So in terms of questions for your provider, the big one, what's your process? I mean, that's a fairly open-ended process. We're probably not talking about, what they do with your images and a technical process and all that sort of thing. You're really trying to understand how their process makes them easy to work with and how they keep you involved in the project, which sort of leads into the second question. Very often there will be situations where a project will start. You'll have a lot of engagement at the start, and then as the project moves on, you kind of maybe get weekly updates, which are the project's on track. Or alternatively, you start the project and then all of a sudden you receive the first draft or a prototype or something along those lines. And at that point, it's a big effort and sometimes an awkward conversation to have, depending what the organisation is, to kind of say, hey, this is definitely not heading down the direction we expected. And especially for new organisations, some of them are hesitant to bring it up at that point because they almost feel responsible for it not going down the track they thought, or they think this is normal. So I think making sure that whoever you're engaging with has a process that keeps you in the loop, and your understanding of how to interact with them is there. So, what's the process if I've got a question or I want an update, or what's the process if I want something changed or I have a new stakeholder? Making sure that's all discussed at the very start of a project is important, because you want to be on your side as reactive as you need to be to any changing situations or any concerns you have. Obviously, the collaboration piece is important for two reasons. One, you want to know that you're going to be involved in that project. Again, the thing that e-learning providers bring to the table is expertise in being able to take a problem and through e-learning help you address that problem. But ultimately the knowledge itself is going to be with your subject matter experts, so SMEs, with the person that's been the catalyst for the project, and ultimately all the knowledge is within your organization. So you want to ensure that the collaboration is going to be there because the provider actually needs your knowledge to achieve your goals, and what they bring to the table is their expertise in how to take that knowledge and do something with it that's going to benefit your organization and create a solution that is actually going to deliver outcomes. The other important reason to ask that question is you need to be able to plan ahead how much time you're going to need to give to a project. This is obviously quite important for projects that have tight turnarounds, or if there's a stakeholder group that is going to be quite involved in a piece. You want to make sure that you give everyone a heads up and an expectation around, okay, this is what's going to be required of you, because one of the most common things that can stall a project or really trip it up is people, one, not knowing that they have to give a bit of time, or two, not planning ahead to give enough of their time to that project. Very often it's, in the early sign-off points or in the early collaboration points, everyone's really happy and no one's paying too much attention, and then something very fundamental comes out later down the track because someone didn't have the time to really do a comprehensive review and give their feedback at a certain point. So that's why the collaboration question is really important. The next one is, I guess, fairly obvious, but make the provider articulate how their solution will achieve your problem, will achieve your desired outcome. There's no reason why you will come to a provider and say, hey, here's my problem, and I'll go, great, we'll fix it, and it's going to be using a piece of systems training, and everyone being happy. You need to understand how that e-learning solution is going to address your problem, because that's also when you're going to discover where it's going to fit in the bigger picture of how that problem is being addressed. So for example, to the example I was using before around the systems training, when the provider is able to articulate, okay, we're going to design a solution. The purpose of that solution is going to be to raise the awareness around this system and get buy-in of this system. At that point, you go, okay, great. So this piece is all about getting buy-in and awareness for a piece of system. That means that I need to probably have a really fantastic comms piece when this rolls out, so staff understand that they're not being patronized, there's an issue, and this is how it's been addressed, and this is helping them understand why the system is going to be rolled out and the training is going to be rolled out with it. And that's how the desired outcome is going to be achieved through communication, e-learning, and follow-up. A lot of organizations like to know what is used to create the learning. So obviously in today's market, there's a lot of providers that use their proprietary tools. There's a lot of authoring tools out there that of varying levels of, complexity and the capability they are able to produce in terms of outcome. Understanding that is good, because what that also means is down the track you can plan around what you would do to update the training. So for example, if the provider uses a authoring tool that's quite common and easy to use, it could be an option for you down the track to make basic edits to your course if you have that resource within your organization. It also means that in the case that the relationship has to end with a particular provider, be it that they don't meet your needs, you're able to take that material and take it to another provider and say, hey, this is what this course was developed in, and moving forward we'd like for you to help maintain this course or recreate it or whatever it happens to be. So understanding that at the start is important, because obviously if the answer to that is that it's going to be in a proprietary tool or a tool that I guess is a little less commonly used, down the track that may cause some issues in terms of bringing on a different provider and having an easy transition between providers. Or even if you have another provider and they're developing other learning for you, you want to make sure that you've got a fairly seamless experience for your learners. So understanding what tool is used is very important. I've kind of covered the how do I make an update, but again, this is around both process and both technical. In 3 months, something may change. So for example, with inductions for organisations, they're relatively safe unless there's a really detailed org structure in that. And then, if someone changes, if positions are renamed, or if someone leaves, someone new comes on board, there's a restructure. You need to understand how the organisation that you're working with, so the provider, is going to help you make those edits, and also a bit of an indication around how they work out the work effort to go into that. You obviously don't want to go with a provider and have a new course developed, which is amazingly cost effective, and then discover every time you want an update, it's a massive cost again, because that kind of balances out in a negative way in terms of, okay, the saving was made at the start, but every time we want to change 2 words, there's a significant cost. You also want to know from this perspective, who do you contact for this? You obviously don't want to be ringing up the number on the website and saying, hey, by the way, I'm a client in this. You want to make sure you've got a really good understanding of who you get in touch with, and that should be an account manager, or is it the project manager, or can you go directly to the team that worked on it, just to make sure that edit process is as smooth for you as possible. It also means that handing that piece over to someone else is smooth, because they know exactly who to contact. And the last piece is really more of, I guess, a service and involvement type piece. So how do you stay in touch with the provider after that particular project? For some providers, it is very much a relationship that exists while a project's being conducted, and then in between projects, it's kind of a very quiet relationship. I think it's important that you understand if a provider is going to make sure that they keep you updated with what's happening in the e-learning space, what they're doing, what's new, what they've discovered, because that should be part of the service to ensure that when you tackle your next e-learning, you have a little bit more understanding of what e-learning is, what the trends are, what they've found, what they're doing different. But at the same time, the provider should be a little bit proactive on behalf of you in terms of helping identify areas they may be able to help you with, or at least bring to your attention. So if there's been some research around e-learning being used in a particular way to address an issue for an organisation that's similar, you'd want to know that that provider is going to get in touch and go, hey, by the way, we've got this interesting piece of material, thought you might be interested. And that might be through direct comms, or it might be through a blog, or whatever it is. But understanding what that service will look like in between projects, I guess, gives you the comfort level that you'll never be floating out there by yourself and having trying to identify what the next piece is, or what you should even be considering as a next e-learning piece. These are some trick questions that you can throw out to providers, and this is probably it's going to be an interesting piece, because this is our opinion around what the correct answers to these questions should be to help you weed out providers that won't really deliver a positive outcome for you. They're just interested in delivering a product at the end. So they're not interested in delivering an actual solution. They're just more than happy to go, yep, that's what you want, we'll do it for you, and not actually be too fussed about if you're going to get a positive return on what you've just taken on board, rolled out to your staff. So one of the areas that's hotly discussed in the industry is, what interactivity will you use? So a lot of providers will, I'll say, they'll dangle something shiny and just pretty much say, oh, here's all the complex interactivities we'll have. We'll have these drag and drops, and we'll have this type of interactivity, and you have this and this and this and this. If you ask a provider very early on what sort of interactivity they'll use for the project, and they're able to answer that, you'd be a little worried, because generally speaking, you only work out what sort of interactivity or what a course is going to look like once you're quite deep into the discovery stage of a project. So if at this point you're getting a really rosy picture around all the complex interactions and the amazing stuff they're going to do from an interactive perspective, either one, you want to dig a lot more deeper and try and get them to articulate to you how they can know all these, I guess, quite detailed specifics of a project that's very early on. Or at that point, you can kind of diagnose them and go, yep, this is going to be a provider that the end solution is probably going to be full of interactions that are lacking in purpose and really not focusing on delivering an outcome from that piece of e-learning, just really looking to be something shiny. We'll use gamification. That's another question that I've kind of had come up from a few clients, and they're often surprised by my answer, which kind of goes back to the interactivity one. Gamification is fantastic so long as it's purposeful. If there isn't a reason to include gamification in a project, you don't want it there. There has to be a reason for it being used there. Obviously, gamification is fantastic at motivating learners to perform the learning and I guess more engaged with it and all that sort of thing. But at the start of a project, if you're saying, okay, we've got this problem, do you think you'll use gamification to solve it? If you're getting a yes or no answer at that point, it is a little bit worrying because again, the provider may have their own agenda in terms of they just want to use gamification, and that's what they're going to do on your project regardless if it actually does complement what you're after or not. And the assessment question. So this one again is an interesting one. If e-learning needs an assessment, then yeah, absolutely use it. But in the early stages of a piece, unless I guess actually even to the point of compliance, it's very rare that there needs to be formal assessment at the end of the course. So if straight away they're talking about this is how learners going to be assessed at the end of the course, it should start to raise alarm bells around, okay, how are all these assumptions already being made before being involved in the discovery stage of a project and all that. So really for all these questions, you're looking for a response that goes beyond yes or no. You're looking for a response that talks about the benefits of each of those, the experience that provider has had using them, but also them articulating that it's really going to be up to the desired outcomes, how the solution is going to come together, audience. So it's a few stages down the line before the details of these sort of questions can be really discussed. And I guess that's one of the areas we find if a provider is able to answer these pretty much straight off the bat, it means that they work on a lot of assumptions in delivering your outcome, and we know what they say about assumptions. So this is a really important question, and this is actually there was recently a business conference in Melbourne, and the whole topic was around innovation versus adaptation, and rather than they really have to be close together for things to work. So the innovation obviously being, okay, your business wants to take on e-learning, you're excited, you know it's the way forward, you've heard all these amazing stories about it working for other organizations. But you do need to think about your organization's ability to adapt to that new way of learning. So obviously, as with all things, there's a big point around, okay, when we change our organization, there's a change management piece. When a new system rolls out, there's change management, all that. A lot of organizations miss the change piece around bringing on e-learning. So it is very important to ensure that when you're considering e-learning, thinking about the impacts that e-learning and that transition to e-learning is going to have on how your organization operates, how your people are able to access learning or how they connect with the learning, and what the messaging is around that training. For an organization that's going from having face-to-face training to e-learning, if it's not managed right, the people can, I guess, read into that and go, oh, okay, so now we're just cost-cutting in terms of our training. So you need to make sure that people understand why this new approach is being brought on board, and ultimately it's to benefit them. It's more on demand. You can access it where you want. You can be more self-directed in your learning. You can explore. So the decision to bring on e-learning is usually in the best interest of your organization's staff, But if the change management and the communication piece isn't done quite right, it can turn out as a negative experience for learners, because it's straight away they go into, oh, okay, this training is just a way of cost cutting, so it's not as important as it was. How will staff be motivated to use it? Now, this is, I guess, a really interesting question, because this is going to change significantly depending who you have working for your organisation, what sort of roles, what industry you're focused on, and I guess how you motivate people to do their work in their day-to-day. Working out how they're going to be motivated to complete the learning is very important. As I mentioned previously, the motivation of getting an email on Tuesday lunchtime saying that you have to complete your compliance training in a week or two isn't what you're aiming for. You need to really identify how this is going to benefit both the organisation, the individual, and help drive the organisation direction they want to go. People join your organisation because they believe in what you do and they want to be part of making that organisation better. So just the same, when you roll out a new learning strategy, be it e-learning or any one for that matter, you need to communicate how this decision is benefiting the things they already believe in by being at your organisation. And that, I guess, sort of covers off a little bit of the communication piece. How are you going to engage with your audience so they get buy-in into it? As I said, an email saying that there's training coming up is a great way to ensure disengagement straight away, because it doesn't show a great deal of importance to that training. So if you have a comms campaign around e-learning or a topic that's coming out, make sure team leaders are discussing this coming up to the learning being rolled out, are all ways to make sure that your staff know why they're going to be doing the training, and connect with it before that learning rolls out. So very often we'll work with organisations and there'll be a comms video or explainer video rather, as we call them now, where it sets up the groundwork for staff understanding why they'll be completing a piece of training and why that decision has been made and what the benefits of that decision are. And the last one, and this is really obviously very important, do you have buy-in from the leadership team? And this isn't so much buy-in that e-learning should be brought onto the organisation. This is genuine buy-in that the way it's going to be used is going to be purposeful, and they believe that it will actually deliver positive change and deliver the outcomes they're after. There's nothing worse than when a learner receives information that they're going to be doing a piece of training, when they discuss that with their team leader, and there's a response that just says, oh, we just have to do it, so yeah, that's why you guys are doing it. That's the greatest way to demotivate a learner from actually engaging with the learning, and I guess understanding, why that piece of training has come out. If their team leader, if their manager, if their CEO gives that sort of response and they don't show a real buy into the learning, then you can't expect that the people who are doing that training as part of the teams or whatever department they're in, the buy-in just isn't going to be there. I guess it's a case of lead by example. If the management and team leaders are excited about the learning and they understand why it's going to be beneficial and they're able to communicate that well, your buy-in's going to be way, way higher than if it's just a case of, hey, this is a formality, we have to do this training, just try and get it done as quickly as possible. So this is a very powerful statement, but if you're able to answer all those questions with confidence and you're able to work with a provider to make sure that all those questions and all those topics are addressed, you're ready for e-learning. Yay! Obviously, quite a broad statement. There's a bit more to it, but really those questions and understanding where your business is positioned in terms of why it wants to bring on e-learning, how people are going to connect with it, what the communication is going to be, what the challenges will be, identifying that is obviously quite important, and how that change piece, the adaptation to e-learning is going to be handled. It's so critical, and that's all the stuff that has to happen even before you start considering the first actual piece of e-learning. All these things have to be addressed and discussed, and everyone has to be comfortable that they're on the same page in terms of these answers before you tackle that first piece. Otherwise, you end up with organisations where, enormous catalogue of e-learning that all kind of does something, but no one's really sure, and your learners are kind of straight off the bat demotivated to actually complete that training because they don't understand why they're doing it. They don't understand how it fits into the organisation's plan, and they're kind of forced to do it in an awkward way. It doesn't seamlessly integrate into their day. So all those questions are important, and if you're able to answer them, you're definitely on the right path to being able to adopt e-learning as part of your L&D strategy. That's gone well. It's 47 minutes. That's essentially the material we've got. What we like to do now is obviously open up to everyone who's in the session. Please feel free to share your questions, and both myself and Matt are on hand to answer them. Yeah, thanks for listening so far, and looking forward to a few questions. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it sounds like we've got a very timid audience. Feel free to heckle. I've got fairly thick skin, so I'm happy to take on any criticism and discuss from there as well, obviously. Alrighty, looks like not too many questions. For those who may have questions and they're not too comfortable maybe asking them in an open forum. Hello, we've got a question from Stephen. What's our opinion on SCORM packages? Okay, do you want to expand a little more on that? Is it in terms of reporting capability, or comparing, I guess, SCORM to Tin Can, or what's the rest of the motivation for that question? SCORM versus Tin Can. Yeah, I think anyone in the e-learning space would love for every organisation out there to adopt Tin Can. In terms of reporting power, it is incredible. So I guess one of the challenges is SCORM captures a lot of, I'll say, metric data. So someone got this question right or wrong. They completed this is how they got their assessment. Once you open up to Tin Can, you start to get a lot more, I guess, behavioral reporting. So how do they interact with this page? Where did they spend most of their time? How long did they spend on this? And all that sort of thing. That's probably the kind of reporting you want to be able to keep evolving e-learning. It's probably not necessarily going to give that much more benefit in terms of did the e-learning achieve a certain outcome. Yeah, absolutely, and that's the power of Tin Can. And at the moment, I think the biggest challenge is for organisations that are new to e-learning. They're just kind of dipping their toe. So being able to push them and go, hey, by the way, you should get an LMS that's got Tin Can integrated, and we'll start designing Tin Can based material is way too early for them. And then for organisations who are already very mature and big, unless they have a system that already natively works with Tin Can, their, I guess, technology change piece is massive to be able to adopt Tin Can solutions, which means, as e-learning professionals, we're in there and going, it'd be really fantastic if you were able to, because all of a sudden your learning becomes so much more powerful the first challenge is getting that technology across the line is a big investment for them. The second one being articulating the power of that behavioral data. And again, that comes back to there are still so many organizations and still such an assumption for e-learning these days that it's yeah, exactly right, Sarah. So you need to understand how to pull that data and what to do with that data once you actually have it. Circling back to the point I made around, at the moment, even with SCORM, you're able to work out who got what questions right and wrong. And a lot of organisations look and they go, okay, Terry got question 3 wrong the first time around, and okay, so he got it wrong, but he got the course right, so happy days. We'll keep him kind of moving on. The power of data is being able to do something. So going, okay, Terry got that question wrong. What do we do with that? Is that something that his major should catch up? Is that something we can have a chat and go, hey, in the e-learning you mentioned this. Do you need some additional information? Is there some additional resources we can give you? What does that data mean? And a lot of organizations really struggle with that behavioral data and what to do with it. Tin Can would produce a massive data it's being able to break that down for an organization and say, here's the power of it. Using this data, we're able to understand your audience better. And moving forward, we'll be able to create e-learning solutions that are more tailored to your organization's audience because we know they struggle with this, or they really enjoy this, or this is how they use the course, or this is what they explore and this is what they don't. So, circle around my opinion of SCORM versus Tin Can. I think SCORM fundamentally achieves the goals we want to achieve today, but Tin Can is, I guess, the thing that'll push e-learning to the next place. And, it'll start to break down that e-learning is a course. It'll start making it e-learning as a matrix of content, and it's more on demand, and it's able to integrate into what people do in their day-to-day. I mean, we have to acknowledge that people learn every single day. They'll go on the Age website and they'll read something about something happening overseas. They'll go on Lynda and they'll learn a little bit about something technical. So people are consuming this, and I guess Tin Can gives us ways to be able to integrate into that and leverage that information as well as the information in a particular piece of e-learning to be able to ensure that the solutions that are produced are more effective for the audience rather than based on assumptions around, okay, who was challenged with what and all that sort of thing. Great. I'll pretend that was completely intended and not a bit of a fluke, but yeah, I like to talk, so eventually I'll get there. Preference around e-learning authoring tools. We here at Pure Learning prefer Storyline. Captivate and Storyline are probably the 2 leading tools for us at the moment. My, I guess, vision for the future is for really there not being e-learning authoring tools. I think one of the challenges I always have is that e-learning is just a form of content. For years and years and years, we've had tools for creating, sharing, and communicating. Why is there such a big divide between e-learning and everything else we do in our day-to-day? So I'm actually hoping that, as we move forward, it'll be more of a case of using the tools we already use, so web development tools, video tools, and all that, and being able to plug the functionality of learner tracking and all that into those tools rather than having bespoke authoring tools. But until that magical day, I think Articulate Storyline is quite powerful for us. It's quite versatile, and it also, I guess, allows people to work quite visually. A lot of the development guys and design guys are very well versed with Illustrator and Flash and all that sort of thing. And the transition from those programs to Storyline isn't that significant for them. Plus, it's quite flexible where we're able to deliver courses that, you'd look at it, and aside from right-clicking and seeing that it was done in Storyline, you wouldn't actually know it's done in Storyline. It gives you quite a bit of flexibility from that perspective. Okay. Well, if there is nothing further, we have our next webinar coming up on e-learning, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this will be a piece obviously focusing on getting a little bit more detail around what makes e-learning good, what makes it bad, and help you guys, if you do choose to attend, to identify the differences and get a bit more understanding around what e-learning can achieve for you. And in terms of from here, we'd really love to hear your feedback in terms of this session and any other thoughts you have. So please feel free to reach out via LinkedIn or via our website or via just emailing me. My email, I think it was up earlier on, but it's Raf, so that's RAF at purelearning, one word, .com.au, and I would be absolutely thrilled to hear feedback and also any thoughts and questions you have. We'll also probably look at shooting through a survey in the next few days, just specifically talking to this session and just getting some thoughts. And we'd also love to hear about what you guys want to learn about. If there's a particular topic you are interested in, let us know, and we'll see if we can squeeze that into our schedule or publish some sort of news post about it. So thanks very much for your time this morning, guys. I hope that was beneficial, and I really look forward to seeing you at future events.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Have a fantastic Thursday.